Welcome back to the Cream City Club podcast. You are listening to episode number 45. I am Spencer Michaelis, and I'm here, as always, with Gunnar Amalunk. Gunnar, how you doing tonight?
More sad than I thought I was going to be for this episode, but as always for our weekend recap, I guess for these Monday episodes, we were both in attendance for our friend's wedding.
Yep.
But be rest assured for people who thought that maybe we might have missed the game, Spencer did have his phone out during the reception, and we did not miss William Contreras' big at bat and for his big home run too. But besides that, we want to shout out Danny and Nicole, fantastic wedding, and we wish them
Yep.
nothing but happiness. But yeah.
Yeah. No, let's clarify. I took it out after the speeches.
I said reception. Yeah, everyone knows you're sitting down, time to waste, food's out.
Listen, it was in the most respectful manner possible.
It was.
I
I
was
can
not
vouch for it.
disrespectful. I did avoid dancing by doing it, but other than that, that was my that was the only thing I avoided with the phone. Um, and yes, shout out to Danny and Nicole. And also it was great to see we got to see like almost 20 of our teammates, I think, from college
Hmm.
ordering on 20. So that was cool. It's always great to see them and catch up. So it was a fun weekend for both of us. But yeah, if you're listening and you haven't yet subscribed, please take a moment to do so on whatever platform you are listening on and to rate us 5 stars. Follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod to stay up to date on these episode releases. And today is going to be a Brewers focused episode. So, Gunner, what do we got coming up for this one?
Little bit of a backwards episode, as I said at the start of this. I'm sad because we just witnessed the Brewers lose to the Marlins. So we're going to start with that game first, and then we'll go over quickly that Astros series. And then we started off a new little segment here where, if you remember last episode, we had this segment where we go big picture ideas or big picture questions for the Brewers. And we had to call it something, so we decided to call it questions for the crew. So we'll end with that. But first, before this Marlins series starts, we had some roster news that probably pertains a little bit to this game. Joey Wiemer was reinstated from the 10-day injured list. New face here I want Spencer to talk about here quickly, which is Bradley Blaylock was recalled from Double-A, skipped right over Triple-A, and we got him up. Chris Roller was optioned back down to Triple-A, and Thiago Vieira was designated for assignment, which is something that we also maybe were sadly hoping for. But Spencer, give us a quick breakdown, little bit of a write-up if you got it about Bradley Blaylock first.
Of course. So, go off the top of the head here. So, the Brewers got Blaylock for Luis Urias at last year's trade deadline. I think the Brewers were pretty much on the edge of DFAing Urias. So, it was at the time, it seemed
Hmm.
like a pretty decent pickup for somebody that they were pretty much giving up on. And Blaylock he was a late round pick out of high school for the Red Sox in 2019. He's gone through Tommy John. He came back last year and he got off to a great start in high A for the Red Sox. So the Brewers took notice. His stuff had ticked up since Tommy John. He had gone from like 88 to 91 on the fastball to 91 to 95. He'd touched 97. So he came to the Brewers in the trade. He was going to be Rule 5 eligible this offseason, and I figured they would probably protect him. But after he got to the Brewers, he was only able to pitch in, I want to say, 3 games before having to sit the rest of the season with some arm soreness and stuff going on. So it was a little concerning. You didn't know if there were obviously lingering effects from the Tommy John or what was going on. He went into the offseason. There was video of him throwing an instruct, so you knew he was healthy, and the Brewers did end up protecting him and putting him on the 40 man. And the reason they did that is because he's pretty much, since the moment they acquired him, had two borderline major league pitches. The fastball, I mentioned the velocity, but it's also got 23 inches of induced vertical break at times, which 18 is an outlier for a fastball. So 23 is almost into alien territory. There's really not many pitchers who can get that much induced vertical break. I will note that he has a very, very over the top delivery. It's even higher, I would say, than Tobias Myers, and that does lessen the effect of that induced vertical break. So the more like downhill you're coming with the arm and a straight down motion, that induced vertical break doesn't have as much of an effect. So it's still an outlier, but it's not as big as it might sound. And then the breaking ball, which he throws a slider and a curveball, it kind of seems like he never has both of them going at the same time, but he also always has one of them going pretty well. So to me, the curveball is the better pitch, but the slider can be pretty decent. And on some nights he might have the slider going better than the curveball. Either way, whichever one's working on that night is a major league pitch that's ready to be used. And then last year, he added a split change. He had struggled with change up in the past, and the split change is something he's been comfortable with. Throws that around 84, 85, and it's got pretty good depth to it. It doesn't have a ton of fade, but it gets swing and miss, and he uses it against lefties a lot. So it's a 3 to 4 pitch mix. Long term, I do think he's a starter, but in terms of right now, coming up, I would imagine he's going to be used out of the pen for the most part. But either way, I was excited to see him called up. Surprised that he skipped AAA completely, but he has been absolutely incredible in AA so far. He's walking under 5% of batters, which puts him in like the 96th percentile for all of AA. He's not a huge strikeout guy this year. He has been in the past, which makes me think that it's still in there and it's coming, and it might play up more out of the pen too. So, yeah, in terms of a short little write up, that was more than a short one, but that was everything I could come up with off the top of my head right now. So, yeah, Blaylock he's here, and I thought there was a pretty good chance we were going to see him because in the first or after the first inning of the game that happened just tonight on Monday, May 20th, game 1 of this Marlins series, Joe Ross pitched the first inning. There really wasn't any signs of anything going terribly wrong or anything in terms of like the velo was okay. Maybe down a little bit, but nothing showing anything. And then suddenly we come back from the top of the second, and Jared Koenig is warming up on the mound. And apparently Joe Ross was dealing with some back tightness before the game. Now it's being called a back strain. And Todd Rosiak, I guess just a few minutes ago, tweeted that it is looking like an IL stint is in the cards for Ross. So the Brewers, who have been dealing with a ton of starting pitching injuries and just pitching injuries in general, we get to add another one to the list. So the reason that is all connected to Blaylock is it felt like this was a really good time to give him his opportunity to come into a game because this is a guy who's been starting in AA and pitched 6 innings his last time out. He's capable of going up to 90, 100 pitches. I guess for me, going to Koenig first made plenty of sense. That's the guy, like, an injury warm-up. Give a guy who's got experience in the majors that it's an awkward feeling to be out there on the mound doing all of your warm-ups instead of being in the bullpen. And you get as many as you want, but you also feel like you're holding the game up and all these things. I've come in for people who are injured before, and it's a weird feeling, I would say. So not making the guy making his debut do that made sense to me, but I really thought he was going to follow Koenig because he was the guy who could give you bulk innings, and I guess Murph did not want to go that direction, so the Brewers had basically a pen game today, and you can't say anything bad about the pitching. Don't get me wrong. They did great in this game. Everybody did their job pretty well, but it would have been nice to see Blaylock, and it would have probably set the Brewers up better for the next stretch of games we've got coming up here because they really burned through the pen today, and we'll get into some of what happened in a few minutes, but yeah, quickly, I guess we should probably talk about Chris Roller. There's really nothing there at the bat. His glove is really good. He really didn't get to do anything. Not surprising that he goes back down for Weimer. And it's not surprising Weimer came back to the majors to me because the Brewers are facing 3 lefty starters this series. So makes sense to try and get Weimer in there and let him hit some lefties when he comes back. And then Vieira, we've talked about before. He's very fun. He seems like an incredible teammate that people probably love having around. So I always feel bad when I have to talk about him in a negative way, but the guy's fastball has terrible characteristics. He has no command of it. Even though he throws it hard, it's just going to get hit at the major league level. And he doesn't have command of really any of his pitches. So it's not shocking to see him DFA'd. It's more surprising to me that he made it this long. But we can dive into this game now, Gunnar. So after Joe Ross has his injury and Jerry Koenig comes in and he's doing a really good job, the Brewers are hitless through 4, I want to say. Was it into the 4th or through 4?
Yep.
Yeah. And Andrew Monasterio finally got them going a little bit when he went dead center for a bomb. Not what I was expecting. I was like looking away and then I turned and I saw it get hit and I thought for a second Chourio hit it and I was excited, and then it was Monasterio and I was still excited but less. But it's always cool to see a guy who I mean, it feels like Monasterio always does something helpful for the team when he's up here. He's not
Hmm.
the best player. He's not anything special, but he is one of those guys who just seems to do something that helps when he's here. And that's all you can ask for guys who are kind of up and down and shuttle guys. But Gunnar, I don't know if we've ever talked about Monasterio because we pretty much have made him a side note at all times. So do you have any thoughts on Monasterio or anything along those
Amongst
lines?
amongst the floater guys of the utility up and downer type players, he's definitely my most favorite. The problem is with him is last year he got into the map maybe a little bit. You could say there's some unluckiness to that maybe with the stretch that he had, but the way that he jumped onto the scene, people thought that he was more than what he actually was. So that's when you get guys like us who are trying to talk people down of like, okay, like we like him in his role, but maybe he's not the starting third baseman of the future on this team. And then that's exactly what happened this season. But yeah, he got off to a slow start, of course, this year, showing really much of nothing. But like I said, he's a guy who's up and down, maybe can't catch a rhythm. Even the one he hit tonight, I thought he crushed that, which he did. He didn't necessarily miss it, but that was only a 101 to dead center. And barely squeaked out, which I'm not at all talking that down. It's amazing. It's a good hit. But I thought that was like smoked. And I mean, 101's nothing to joke about. But yeah, I don't hate him. I mean, Owen Miller is the other guy who's on this roster right now, which we'll talk about a bit later. Um, he also, I think he had one hit today. Yeah, he had a good hit, but that would be a guy I don't necessarily enjoy on the team when it comes to those type of roles on the team. But yeah, I mean, he got it going right away, and that was pretty much all the offense we had in this one until Yelich decided to take things in his own hands, is quite literally, um, manufactured a run all by himself. I'm going to call this one the Yelich sequence because, like I said, it was all by himself. He started out with a walk, then steals second base, an arid throw to center field, jumps on that right away, slides over to third base. And he does something that I know Spencer and I were talking. I've done it a few times in Little League. Um, I know Spencer said he's done it a few times in Little League. It's just the classic Little League move when you're starting to scout out the catcher a little bit, and he's lollipopping it back to the pitcher, and you're like, okay, well, you start doing the math if you can make it or not. Something you don't see in the big leagues quite literally at all. But we all know how good of a runner Christian Yelich is. Even I'm surprised that he did that, but he scouted it out, like I said, got a nice lob throw back to the pitcher, and he stole home. So. Um, I guess Spencer, do you have any thoughts on the Christian Yelich sequence? I know, like I said, it's very rare, even though I know he's a great base runner, to even see that happen in the big leagues.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if the catcher has like the yips or something. It's not like it was like a really like ugly throwback to the like the pitcher, but
No.
it was definitely something that they probably talked about in the dugout beforehand, or Yelich noticed it or whatever. But yeah, I guess if you wanted to break that down a little bit, I know there's not really a ton to that, but
Yeah.
an exciting sequence nonetheless, I guess.
Yeah. Very exciting play. You could see on the replay that he took off before the guy actually let go of the ball.
Hmm.
Um, he kind of cocked the hand back to start throwing it, and Yelich just took off. And on the replay, you can hear the third baseman in the dugout go start to scream before the ball leaves his hand. But what people don't understand is once you commit, at some point you just can't not throw the ball. And you're not going to hear that until afterwards. And um, shout out to Ryan Weathers for the bare hand catch and chuck right back on the money, pretty much to the plate to make it a play. I mean, it ended up being close. I would have been curious if they would have been able to call blocking the plate if they had called him out because he was there the whole time, pretty much in the way. But just an incredible play. And like you said, that was a classic in Little League. Like every time you're watching the catcher and you're like, all right, he's really lobbing this. I could totally take this. And yeah, that was for those who know me now and not when I was a kid. I used to be fast, I promise. um, so yeah, used to do that. Definitely have not seen a major leaguer do it. I know they said on the broadcast that the last straight steal of home for the Brewers, meaning not like a double steal, was Scott Podsednik in 2003. So it had been a while, 21 years since anybody stole home, either
What's
outright
funny
or on
about
a
that? I just
throwback.
thought about this, but Little League wise, why that probably is a little more riskier is because there's quite literally 10 people in the crowd. Where
Oh
here
yeah,
at Marlins Park, there's 10 people in the crowd, which actually makes this even more impressive because he probably can hear people yelling like, "Hey, this guy's going home." And like you said, he probably heard it, but it was too late at that point. But
yeah.
makes it even more impressive, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean it was a very fun play, and it would have been cool if it was the run that ended up holding the game together, but that ended up not being the case. Elvis Peguero did escape a seventh inning jam that he put himself into in a way. Um, Unfortunately, Joey Ortiz made a diving attempt, and it just barely clipped his glove, and that ended up actually probably costing the Brewers a little bit because I don't know that that run scores, and I definitely don't think Bell gets to third on it. Now, obviously, Peguero was able to get a double play to end the inning, so that didn't end up causing any further damage. But if he would have been able to keep that ball on the infield, that double play may have ended the inning without any damage at all. So unfortunate. Peguero's looked good recently. Not really worried about him. I think the bigger issue was that they weren't getting a couple calls and that Sanchez didn't catch the ball great on a couple of sliders. So then he went up a little higher to Nick Gordon on his last slider, and he was able to slap it to left for that that hit off of Joey Ortiz's glove. But Brian Hudson then put himself into a bit of a jam in the eighth inning as well. So it's 2-1 at that point after Peguero did give up the one run, but was able to get out of it with the lead still. And then Hudson came in, gave up a single, a rare hit against him, it seems like. Um, and then he hit the next batter with a sweeper. So it's first and second, nobody out. And then he just went fastball right past Jazz Chisholm, fastball right past Brian De La Cruz, and then fastball on Josh Bell's hands that he popped up to Owen Miller and got out of it. So Brian Hudson just continues to be absolutely fantastic. Then in the ninth, we have Jake Bauers smokes a double. Andrew Monasterio singles. This is all two outs, obviously. Monasterio singles. Jake Bauers hits for Owen Miller and smokes a double to right. Monasterio is going to score with ease, and unfortunately, the ball gets stuck under the fence, and that creates a ground rule double, which I understand why an automatic double, you can't place the runners. I will say for my whole life, I've wondered why you can't place the runners on an automatic or on a ground rule double because the difference being an automatic double is when the ball bounces over the fence. Like there's obviously nothing that could have happened there. No one has any control over. Ground rule double is stuff related to getting stuck in the fence or getting stuck under a bench when they had the bullpens in play, that type of stuff. So it's a bit different. And I've always thought that the umpire should be able to place the runners, which they would have given Monasterio home. They can't. They made the right call. It's exactly how it's supposed to be handled. And then after Blake Perkins walks, they brought in Nardi to face Blake Perkins, and he walked Perkins, which was that's not what you want to do in front of William Contreras. I don't think they were hoping for that. The lefty having to face Contreras with the bases loaded, and Contreras just barely missed a grand slam. Hit the ball 100 miles per hour, 37-degree launch angle, made it a little bit too high, so it ended up being a flyout. And then in the bottom of the ninth, we got to see Trevor McGill, who looked fine. Honestly, he did. He got two flyouts. Honestly, his probably the two worst pitches of the inning were the first two outs. Those were actually hit pretty decently. Both of them had decent swings on them. He then proceeded to give up a single to Nick Gordon, and Gordon stole second base on McGill more than anything on a breaking ball. And then Otto Lopez hits a pop-up to right, and Jackson Chourio is going after it really hard. Seems like he has a decent beat on it and pulls up at the last second rather than diving for it. Gunner, first I'll tell you this because we didn't talk about this. I don't know if you saw it. Statcast had a catch probability of 0% on that ball, meaning nobody in baseball should have been able to catch it. I don't know that I buy that. It looked like he was close enough to me to, especially because he pulled up and then it still only felt like, I don't know, 8 to 10 feet away from him after he pulled up pretty early. What was your opinion on it in the moment? Did you feel like he should have gone after it and dove for it? Or did you think it was better to play it safe in that spot and not let the winning run get into scoring position? What were you thinking at the time?
I think you got to go for it there. Ball's coming straight down, literally as straight down as it can happen. Two outs, games on the line, of course. We had Bowers right on top of him pretty much too. You might have had even close to three guys, two at least, who are right there to pick up the ball if you do dive and don't grab it. Yeah, I mean, thinking back, I didn't see that stat like you said, the 0%. I did think I saw a couple screen grabs of like where he was and where he stopped. it didn't seem that close, but like I said, even so, it's worth an effort. And he did pull up a little bit soon because it's almost like he was clocking it in his head, like,
Yep.
I'm going to be safe here. It wasn't like he was fully going 100%. I'm going to dive for this ball and try to win us the game. So maybe that had a little bit to do with that probability. I don't know if that's just straight off of where he was and then where the ball landed, and that's how they do
It
the
is.
math or
Yeah,
whatever.
it's all based
Um,
on where you start and where it lands
okay.
and how much
So
time
then,
it was
yeah.
in the air.
Yeah, but I think even so, I think it's still worth a try. Um, and I just don't think the reward of him being safe. I mean, what did we gain out of that, really? I mean, the guy kept him on first with 2 outs. Worst case, he's on second base with two
Yeah.
outs. I just don't think it was worth it there. But I guess another learning moment for Jackson Chourio. He's getting plenty of those in these last few weeks, in different ways. But yeah, I'm sure people told them like, hey, that's the situation where you can go for it. But it's a tough spot to be in, I guess, if you're a young guy and
Yeah.
never been put in a spot like that.
Right. Especially if you really don't think you can get to it, then you're like,
Right.
well, why would I dive? But I felt like in the moment he should have dove for it. I'm not convinced that the 0% catch probability is super accurate. He was very deep to start, and I don't really understand that either because the tying run was in scoring position, meaning you would want to try and throw him out on a single hit to you. So why you would be
Yeah.
playing that deep, I'm not really sure, but I definitely was not expecting that ball to fall when it went up in the air. I thought the game was pretty much in the Brewers' hands when it left the bat, and then you could tell it was falling in no man's land the whole time. So that was tough. And then McGill was able to get out of the inning after that. So it goes to the 10th. Um, the Marlins bring in, why can't I find his name? Tanner Scott. I wanted to say Trevor Scott, and I knew it wasn't. Tanner Scott, who I actually wanted the Brewers to get from the Orioles a few years ago. Neither here nor there. A lefty who has really, really good stuff, but huge control issues. Like, I believe he had 17 walks coming into the game in 19 innings. He also had 20 strikeouts. He's a big strikeout guy. He's been a bigger strikeout guy in the past than he has been this year. But Yelich is up first. It's a lefty-lefty matchup, so Yelich is squaring to bunt, and I don't love it. But he offered, or he pulled back twice to get to 2-0 on 2 balls. He then didn't square for the next 2 pitches, and he took 2 more balls, and he went to first. 4-pitch walk. Joey Ortiz comes up then. So now we're first and second. Nobody out. One of the hottest hitters on the team and in baseball at the moment at the plate. And Ortiz, who I can't imagine has done much sacrifice bunting in his career, squares for the first pitch, pulls back. Not sure he actually pulled back, but he did pull back. They said no offer. So it's 1-0. Another ball. Next pitch. Nowhere near. Another ball. At this point, I already didn't want him squaring around for the first 2 pitches. I'm thinking, well, Yelich got to swing, like, or he had the option to swing after the first two. Like, there's no way he's going to keep bunt. Nope. Squares the bunt, gets a good bunt down. He does exactly what he's supposed to do. Now, could he have pulled back? Probably, but in the end, you're getting asked to bunt and you get the bunt down like you did what you're supposed to do. Moves the runners to second and third, but what's going to happen when that happens is Willie Adames is coming up, a guy who's been known to strike out from time to time. And you just, to me, I'll get your opinion here in a second, Gunner, but there is just no reason. Like, that is an awful decision to me. It's not even, there's no debating. I don't care if Willie Adames gets a 2-run single there. I think it's the wrong decision. And Willie needed to have a better at bat than he did to go down swinging there. Like, you need to get a ball in play. There's no question about that. He swung at a pitch nowhere near the zone for strike three. Like, a really, really bad at bat. But either way, I think that's a terrible process for Ortiz to be bunting there. And this whole game, I have been pleasantly surprised by how Pat Murphy has managed this season. This entire game was almost exactly, it was all of my fears when we made the hire in one game, like everything that he did, like managing to win too hard with the bullpen usage, because I just feel like Blaylock would have made a lot more sense to get you through a bunch of innings and not have to use every single reliever you had in your pen outside of Blaylock. And it might have cost you the win at that point. Like, you never know. It is a guy making his debut. It might not have gone well, but I can live with that process because I think it would have been the correct decision. And then to get to this point and to have all of you have your hottest hitter up, a guy who's just been absolutely on fire, a guy who's you're batting third for a reason in this lineup, facing a lefty And again, there's a strikeout risk on deck in Willie. There's a guy that you are very, or a pop up. He pops up a lot too. Like two of the worst things a hitter can do there are two of the things Willie does a lot. And to try and set him up in that spot just made no sense to me. It never will. I think it's an awful decision. And I saw while we were recording this that he was playing for one run there. He said we were going for one run. Like you don't play for one run as the away team ever, 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 ever. That is awful. That's a terrible process. And that really, really ticks me off. I rarely get worked up about games in May, like ever. I don't, these types of games, I normally can just flush them, but when it's just dumb, it's just stupid. There was no reason to do what he did. And I knew as soon as Ortiz got the bunt down and that Willie came up, I pretty much knew exactly what was going to happen. Gary Sanchez put a decent swing on a ball that ended up getting caught by Jazz Chisholm sprinting in, and I thought for a split second it might be a cheap little blooper that scored 2 runs and they got bailed out, but it wasn't. So, Gunnar, now that I have ranted about all of it, what were your thoughts on it? I know you are not pro bunting in many scenarios either. So, in general, I'm sure you weren't a fan, but this specific case, what did you think?
Yeah, let me walk it back a little bit so I can get my mental state back. The Yelich at bat, lefty versus lefty. One, just on that merit alone, Yelich is a good hitter, so I don't necessarily care about that. If there's one guy in our lineup where I'm not super worried about that scenario, it's Christian Yelich. But we also know, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, he is the bunt master on this team. He's a very good bunter. So I guess if you stack those two things up against it, leadoff guy, no outs, guy in second base. I'm ignoring the fact that we're playing for one run here, but I guess that's pretty obvious if you're bunting. Um, yeah, if he gets it down in the first two pitches, I guess that I can live with that. Maybe I can live with that. I still wouldn't like it, but it makes sense to me. Then he gets to 2-0, like you said. Now he's free to swing, which is awesome to see. I actually was totally fine with that sequence. Because now you have, well, first with the bunt, you got a guy with Joey Ortiz coming up next, which that's where you have to stop it at because that makes some sense. A contact hitter, a guy who's going to put it in play. If you're having the small ball thinking, that makes sense. But then obviously you switch it back to Yelich. It's 2-0. Now he's swinging, ends up walking. Now it's Joey Ortiz up. Maybe a little bit less better of a hitter on paper, but obviously, like you said, he's red hot right now. But clearly we're playing small ball again. He tries to bunt in the first two pitches. Like I said, I think like you said, he might have went in one of them, but he tried to bunt 2 balls again. So on top of this pitcher has not thrown a strike. Keep in mind. So like you said though, I just want to see a strike. Like he has proved nothing at this point. So on like screw trying to bunt. I want to see this guy actually get one across the plate. So Joey, instead of pulling it back like Yelich does and actually trying to free swing with the hot hitter up, guy who makes contact. A bat I super trust right now. We'll get into that later. I love his swing and everything right now. Ends up bunting, and didn't rewatch it because I didn't love the play, but I think that he might have been a ball that he bunted, or he just made it, or he just made it
It
look
was way
like it
inside.
was. Yeah, so he got it down, awesome. But imagine if he didn't get that one down and it ended up being a pop up somewhere because he couldn't get the bunt down or something more crazier, and I would have just ripped my head off in that situation. But yeah, with having Willie Adames up next, you do basically what you wanted in that scenario. You got exactly what you wanted. But bad because Willie Adames is a strikeout hitter. Love his bat. In that, normally I love his bat, obviously. And even in that scenario, I like his bat. I will trust Willie Adames in that spot. He's a great hitter. But if you're going small ball, quote unquote, with the strikeout hitter, I'm not super shocked at the result there. So, and then obviously you're putting a ton on the plate of Gary Sanchez, but you just gave up a whole at bat with one of your hottest hitters in the heart of your lineup. And like you said, playing for one run there, we are at the best spot in our lineup. You cannot pick a more perfect spot to be batting in our order, and you're playing for one run on the road. I think I saw Jack had a good tweet. Even before, I'm sure what you just said with Pat's post game, I think Jack tweeted beforehand how he said, as the road team, you pretty much never play for one run because say you get the one run and it works out perfectly how you want it, the team already has the tying run on second base with
Yep.
no outs for them, and then they just got to get that one run across, and then now they're cooking already. It's already tied now. The ball's in their court basically. Um, So yeah, I think a lot of stuff happened in this game, but you could have tweaked a little bit here or there that maybe you had a chance, but um that's just really inexcusable managing in my opinion. Um I'm glad people seem to be agreeing on this point, it seems like on Brewers Twitter right now, but as I told you before we started recording, the next time this happens and we do the opposite and it doesn't work, it's gonna be, oh, we should have bunted and whatever. But I think going forward, now that we have it on recording for us, I would not like to bunt in those scenarios,
Yeah.
regardless of the outcome. I just think I don't like handing the other team an out, especially in that spot in the order that we were at. It's just,
Yeah.
it honestly just makes me cringe when you do that. Yeah.
And like you mentioned, it was six straight balls. If I'm a pitcher and I can't find the zone and you hand me an out, do you know how much pressure just came off my shoulder? Like
hmm
he could have
You just
walked
gave him an out.
Ortiz on four pitches and had the bases loaded, nobody out with ease. He was well on his way to doing that. Now he's got an open base to work with when he faces Adames, so he knows he doesn't have to be perfect. And all of the pressure is off of him now. He's got an out, he's got an open base, and he hasn't just thrown eight straight balls to open his outing like he was pretty much on his way to doing. It would have been seven for sure because that pitch Ortiz did bunt was not a strike. So I don't know. Like I said, I rarely get that upset during a May game, but I was pretty heated when he kept squaring. I was just not happy. Um, and then obviously, unfortunately, Mitch White is pretty much the only reliever left outside of Bradley Blaylock, who was clearly not available today, in Murph's mind, unless the game was completely out of reach or something. So White comes in. Honestly, he did fine. He did pretty much what he was able to do. They ended up bunting a guy over, because in that spot, they are playing for one, and it makes sense to try and get that. And they had the top of the order coming up behind him. The Brewers intentionally walked Chisholm and De La Cruz, and then obviously they poke a single through the right side, and that's the game. So a tough loss. I would say honestly, the only game that I would pretty openly blame Murphy's management for the loss. I think it was a pretty big part of this game. And as I've said many times, I don't think he's a big problem, but I do think this was a very, very poorly managed game. So we'll move backwards now to the Houston series, a series in which the Brewers were coming off of a series win against the Pirates and they've been playing pretty decent baseball for a while now. They just so happened to catch Houston, a very talented team who got off to a terrible start at probably the worst time the Brewers could have caught them. They entered the series winning five in a row. They've been figuring some things out with their pitching. The bats have started coming alive. So the Astros are not the same team that they were a month ago when they were really, really struggling. And they're up over 20 wins now. They're probably more in line with what you would have expected to see before the season, regardless of what the record shows at the moment. So heading into game one against Houston, you got Freddie Peralta on the mound. Feel like you have a pretty good chance anytime he's on the bump. You get Jake Bauers hitting an absolute moonshot to right, second deck bomb, which you don't see too many. I remember Prince going up there a few times, and Prince went real deep into the second deck once, where he went like three rows from the top of the second deck. But still, not too many guys are going up there. And Bauers, who's just been hitting really, really well lately, it was just a rocket. You knew it was gone the moment it left the bat. And then Joey Ortiz, who has also been very hot, as we mentioned earlier, with an opposite field home run. His first Oppo homer of the season. Guy has been hitting a lot of doubles and triples down that right field line, and this time he was able to elevate it a little bit more and put it out. So going into the fifth inning, the Brewers were up 4-2 with Freddie on the mound. Freddie had given up who hit the first homer? I can't remember. Either way, up 4-2, and Jeremy Pena is up, and
Jake Myers, that's who it was.
yes, Jake Myers, who was a pain the entire series.
hmm
But anyway, Freddie is up 4-2. He's got two runners on for Jeremy Pena, and they showed some stats on the broadcast, and we saw him on Twitter as well. But third time through the order has been a problem for Freddie, and it's not uncommon. That's pretty normal for pitchers in general, but for Freddie, it's very noticeable. Second time through, the OPS is in the 400s. Third time through, it's in the 800s. And he was facing Pena for the third time, and Pena was able to take him into the Crawford boxes. And this wasn't as cheap a Crawford box home run as we've seen before. I think it would have been gone in a decent chunk of the stadiums. I didn't look at how many of them, but I do know that he hit it pretty much to the back of the boxes into that left center gap. So I think it would have had a pretty good chance at a place like AmFam as well, getting into that Brewers pen. The issue here being Freddie Peralta has been struggling of late, and it really started after that suspension, after the ejection, I should say, because he was pitching fantastic in that game that he got ejected in, and it just has not been good here. So I wouldn't say I'm starting to worry about him. I don't think that there's any reason to be super concerned about him. I think the ERA jumped over 4 now, where it was really good to start the year. Um, his command's been lacking lately, a lot more than it did early in the season. The velo is not great this season in general, but the fastball itself has really good characteristics. The slider is moving as much as ever, and he's commanding it as well as he ever has. Um, it's just a matter of he's been making too many mistakes, and he's also been putting too many people on base before he makes these mistakes. And early in the season, if you remember, he gave up a decent amount of homers, but they were all solo shots because he wasn't walking people, he wasn't hitting people, he wasn't putting people on base, and he's been doing that a lot more lately. And obviously, in this case, it ended up being the difference maker because that gave him a 5-4 lead, and it was never relinquished because the Astros do have a solid back end of their pen. And that game was, of course, finished off by none other than Josh Hader, who has seemingly figured things out for them of late. His ERA is down to looking more like a normal pitcher. And in his last, I believe, 10 or 11 outings, it's down below 3. So he's been very good for a little while now. Terrible start, but we know what Josh Hader is capable of. That's not really a surprise. Didn't have much hope when he came into the game and ended up proving to be correct on that, unfortunately. But game 2 was the day that we were at the wedding. So this was the game I was paying some attention to on my phone. Fun fact from this one, Jackson Chourio, who was born the same year that Justin Verlander was drafted by the Tigers and was only 15 months old when Verlander debuted in the majors. He got the first hit of the game for the Brewers. He ended up getting on base twice against Verlander, including a walk as well. And he had another hit later in the game as well. So it was his first time, I think, since April 20th that he reached base 3 times in a game. So it was a good game from him. Good to see. But the highlight of this one was obviously William Contreras' 13 pitch at bat against Verlander. Verlander was at the end of his rope. He knew Contreras was his last batter that he was going to face, and Contreras just kept fouling everything off. Eventually, Verlander just said, all right, I'm going to keep throwing you fastballs, and whoever wins this wins this. And on the 13th pitch, Contreras won it with an absolute rocket to left center, almost 110 off the bat, 430 feet, just crushed. An incredible at bat. It was probably the only one I could think of that was like similar was the Jesus Aguilar walk-off against the Marlins back in 2018 when he fouled off a ton of pitches and ended up going deep to end the game. Just a really, really good at bat. Funny enough, that was the first at bat that I had turned the game on my phone. So you're all welcome. I'm not taking credit, but I am, and it was my doing. Obviously, after that, the Bryce Wilson ended up only going, I think, 4 1/3, 4 2/3. He didn't get out of the 5th, but the pen did a great job. Wilson had given up 2 earned runs, and the pen held it down the rest of the way. Brian Hudson worked around base runners in terms of Kyle Tucker and Yordan Alvarez, lefties don't do much against him, but those two don't have any problem with the same platoon side arms. They both hit lefties very well. I could not believe Yordan was able to reach out and get that slider in the other box and hit it up the middle for a single, but Hudson was able to get out of that, and then we did get to see Trevor McGill close that one out, including a Victor Caratini strikeout to end the game. I was a little concerned because Caratini is a known clutch hitter for no reason. He's not a great hitter, but he seems to come through in the clutch all the time. But McGill ended up being able to put him away. So, Gunnar, do you have anything to add to that one? I know the Contreras at bat is probably the one that stands out more than anything.
Yeah, I was just going to shout out you on the excellent timing, like you pointed out. That was the first time that we even opened the phone up, I think, for that Brewers game. Maybe I'm sure you snuck a few looks in your pocket at the box score.
I promise.
I won't believe you on that, but we'll
I had it. I swear.
But yeah, I mean, that's right in the heart of his hot streak. If you go back in the time machine, and I mean, he's still doing good, but seemed like he could just not miss at that point. I feel like we had a couple conversations even during that at bat, and I kept looking back at the phone. I'm like, he's still hitting, and then it ended up going perfectly in the best way possible. So, even you mentioned Bauer's home run up in the second deck. I can't imagine, or I can't remember a lot of home runs even for righties who went center, left center-ish. It's more center in that place, but almost up by the train tracks up there. So. Yeah, I mean, incredible at bat, like I said, and you said, I mean, that's going to be probably the at bat of the year.
Yeah,
And coming at maybe, like I said, is going to be maybe his hottest streak of the season too.
yeah,
It was a good way to cap it off.
indeed. Um, we'll talk about that in a second, actually. I do want to get back to that a little bit. But game three, we'll quickly go through. Colin Ray was not special. He did not have a Colin Ray special. Um, 4 earned runs in the first inning. Lucky to get out of everything he got out of in the end. He had base runners on every inning. He ended up only giving up one more earned run, but he just looked bad. He was not missing any barrels. He wasn't missing that many bats. Just not a great outing from Ray. It's very rare that he doesn't get through five, but he was not able to get through five in this one. Bryce Terang was probably the main bright spot for the offense in this one with a few hits. He's kind of got he went into a little bit of a cold slump, but he's actually been hitting the ball pretty well again lately with taking the ball to the left. He's had a bunch of doubles going down the left field line and just doing a good job of staying inside the ball and hitting the ball the other way. And I mean, I'm still not convinced it's super sustainable, but I do think he's inarguably a better hitter than I was expecting him to be. And it's clearly the approach he should have because this is the type of hitter he's capable of being. So it's good to see him kind of figure things out again after a bit of a cold stretch. The Brewers made a couple pretty valiant attempts at coming back in this one. Contreras flew out to the wall and right at one point. It was a 3-run, would have been a 3-run homer that would have given the Brewers the lead back. And then Willie Adames just barely missed one to straightaway center. In AmFam, it would have been out according to Statcast. So it would have been a game tying 3-run homer. Game tying, or would it given them the lead at the It might have been a go ahead 3-run homer when he hit it. I can't remember if it was 6-4 or 7-4. I probably should know that, but either way, it would have either tied or taken the lead. And after that, yeah, it would have taken the lead. That's right, because they had brought it. They had
That's what I
scored
thought.
three. They scored three in the seventh to bring it within two when
Yep.
Adames came up, and then he
Would have
flew
been
out to
seven
the warning
six.
track.
Yeah.
Yep. And then in a move that I will back from Murph, he went to Mitch White, and he ended up giving up 3 runs right back. Now, there was a cheap Crawford box home run in this one where Kyle Tucker hit one off the top of the wall in left. Would not have been a home run at any other park in baseball, 1 of 30. So that one was pretty cheap, but I saw a lot of people who were upset that White came into that game, and I saw a lot of thinking along the lines of, well, you make this nice comeback, and now you're going to go to White. And listen, I feel like I understand that train of thought from a fan's perspective, and like, I get it because I feel those things at moments too. Like, boy, it feels like the momentum has turned to the Brewers' favor. And if you can have a clean inning here, like you might be able to just jump right back out. But when you're talking about major league bullpens, they're bringing in a new reliever that next inning. You're not facing the same pitcher. You're not carrying momentum over against the same pitcher. And the Astros are bringing in good relievers to close their games. You're not going to face somebody that's going to be an easy, and there's no easy arms in MLB, but in terms of MLB context, you're not facing anybody who's going to just give up runs at will. And Mitch White needs to get the job done. That's kind of why you're on a major league roster. And you have to be willing to use guys like that in that spot. And I think he made the right decision. And Mitch White just isn't very good. And he gave up 3 runs. And again, it was cheap. At AmFam, I think there's a decent chance that Kyle Tucker ball is caught by the left fielder. But they were playing in Houston, and it's a home run in their park. So unfortunately, that was the extent of the scoring, and I think it helped kind of prove the point that the offense was still pretty unlikely to score 2 to 3 more runs after that. They kind of had their shot with the Willie swing, and when that didn't go out, it was pretty unlikely that they were going to be able to do anything after that. So I would say the correct decision. I don't know if, Gunnar, you had any different thoughts on that or where you land on that.
No, I always just think in those situations, it's like free money, pretty much. I mean, you're losing the game. And like you mentioned, it's not basketball. There is no tangible momentum to ride. It's not like you just went on a 15. I mean, if you want to compare it to the Wolves Nuggets game last night, it's not like the Wolves coming back from 15 and then all of a sudden now it's like, okay, we're going to the fourth quarter and now we got this game tied up and we were just down 15 at halftime. You can't play it like that. You're happy that you're back down, only down 2 runs. But like you said, those are the games where you need guys like the last two guys in your bullpen where you're hoping they're a little bit better than maybe guys like Viara and White at that point. But um, that's where I think it's more of the free money, in my opinion. It's just like, all right, do your job, and then we'll take being only down 2 runs and take that opportunity again into next inning and maybe do something with it. But if you don't, you're already going to lose technically on paper, as bad as that sounds. So, yeah, I just think we did what we had to do there and it didn't work out. And the fact that it's against Kyle Tucker, makes this all worse because it's like, oh my God, we got this bad pitcher against one of the best hitters in baseball. This no way
Yeah.
this goes well, and then it doesn't go well. So you're like, oh my God, why didn't we put somebody else in? Well, okay. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. You just can't use high leverage guys every time in that type of spot. It's
Right.
just can't do it. And as we saw with game one of the Marlins series, like we talked about, they ended up needing almost every pitcher in the entire bullpen to get through the game. So that's part of the reason you can't just be going out and using high leverage guys every time the game's within 2 to 3 runs. Like you can't. Your end of the pen guys have to be able to get some outs in spots like that. And Vieira wasn't, and White hasn't either. And I think Vieira got DFA'd like we talked about, and I don't think White is far behind. Taylor Clark is getting close to being back from his injury. He's in AAA. Um, they have a Noli Paredes out there who's been pitching very, very well and actually has 2 good pitches, which is more than White or Vieira has. So I would love to see Paredes get a chance at some point here too. But and maybe Blaylock is able to just stay up in a pen roll. That wouldn't shock me either. But that'll wrap up all the games we've had recently, but we did have a few other of the big things here, so it's time for questions for the crew. Um, I guess we'll start here, Gunnar, with Murph's usage of treatment and kind of did I say of treatment of Chourio, usage of Chourio. Um, he was again pinch hit for in the game that Willie ended up flying out in, which was Sunday, and Blake Perkins comes in for Jackson Chourio in that spot. Why? I don't know. Like, we can talk about Blake Perkins a month ago pinch hitting for Chourio. If you're going to pinch hit for Chourio in that spot, then sure, I could kind of see it because Blake Perkins was mashing for a little while. Blake Perkins was 6 for his last 68. This was actually Saturday. I don't know why I said Sunday. No, it was Friday. Man, I'm all screwed. It was Friday for sure because I was watching it and I was not watching on Saturday. Um, Either way, not a good decision in my opinion. Um, Blake Perkins has not done anything offensively for quite some time. And we've talked about it before, but it just feels like you have to let Chourio work through things and learn at the major league level. And you talked about it when we talked about the pop-up. Like that might have just been a learning experience for him to know that that dive is worth it, whether he truly believes he can get to it or not. The ball's not going anywhere, that type of stuff. You learn on the fly. You learn by being on the field, and pinch hitting him for somebody who's just not good it doesn't make any sense to me. Now, like let's say Gary Sanchez is available on the bench in that spot and you want him to hit because he might hit a home run in that spot and tie the game. Like, sure, absolutely. I get that. I still would prefer in most scenarios that Chourio is the one who's working through this and getting an opportunity, but I don't think Chourio's dumb. I think he knows that the guy hitting for him is not very good, and that cannot help the confidence level of somebody who's trying to gain that confidence. And I don't know. Is there any logical explanation you can come up for this, Gunner, or was there anything that makes it feel reasonable in your opinion?
No, I mean, it goes back to the conversation of, and I don't want to repeat myself, I hate doing it, but it's just like, I get you're in a tough spot of trying to win games, and it seems like a guy who's struggling, and you think you have a better option to hit, but the problem is, as you mentioned, the guys you're putting them in for, they're not any better options. So there's nothing to gain there whatsoever outside of maybe gaining the young player who's supposed to be our next superstar some high leverage situations. Like you said, defensively, he got one tonight again. Maybe he didn't make the right call, makes a safe call, whatever. We talked about it, but a chance where he gets to learn and he's going to be better going forward. Um, hitting wise, you need that more than anything. I mean, I can speak to it as a hitter. I'm not a big league hitter or anything like that, but those moments really, really, you learn a lot more from those moments than not being in them, even
Yes.
if you strike out or whatever the case may be. Um, and if we think he's going to be who we think he's going to be, he needs situations like that. But maybe my one problem too with Pat is I think sometimes he wants to put I heard someone say this, and I don't remember who said it, or maybe it's a tweet or something, but and I know we've talked about this with Craig Counsell in the past, and we probably disagree on it a little bit, but sometimes when like you feel the manager too much is when I don't like it. And he gives me this old-timey feel, and that I don't necessarily like, where it's like I have to put my imprint on this game. Um, and really for no reason. And I look at the situation like we just laid out, and there's no reason to do it. It's just almost like you're trying to purposely put yourself in the game, like I'm gonna make this call right here, um, for no reason. And I saw Craig do that sometimes, blindly doing like pinch hits and stuff. I think a lot of those were more analytically based, so I didn't actually hate those most of the time. But some people are probably thinking about Jesse Winker right now. It's not who I'm thinking of, but
Who's
my joking
mashing,
brain.
by the way.
Yeah. Um, but stuff like that, I just maybe you have something to that, and maybe you've seen that with Pat this year, but um, I don't know. It's maybe like I said, I'm thinking too much of like I'm getting into his brain of like he thinks it's like an old timey situation. I don't know. I just it's not nothing tangible I can really point to outside of this where it literally doesn't help the team.
Yeah.
It's just like I'm trying to make a point here, and it's like why?
It does feel like, well, just from Chourio specifically, it feels like he's trying to make a point to Chourio all the time. And I don't love that. Like, I get you want to coach him hard, and that's fine. And it's probably good for him to have some tough love and to learn lessons that he didn't have to learn in the minors because he just mostly dominated. Um, but you also can't make everything a lesson. And like I said earlier, you have to learn those lessons for yourself on the field more often than not. And again, like you touched on, this is supposed to be the guy. This is the guy we gave the biggest contract to in the history of baseball for someone who's never played a major league game. This is the guy who's been a number one or number two prospect in all of baseball for over a calendar year before he even got called up. Like, this is the dude. You need to let him learn how to work up at the major leagues. And I would say what the Reds did last year was let Ellie De La Cruz work through all of his mistakes and all of his issues. And obviously, they fell out of the playoff race, which made that a little easier. But I don't know how many of you are paying attention to Ellie after all the jokes that Brewer fans loved to make last year and how annoyed they got that MLB was posting him all the time. That dude is on pace for 120 steals right now and almost 40 homers. So I think he's pretty good. I probably wouldn't make any comments about him anymore, and I never have because I thought he was really good last year and a guy who was working through stuff. But guess what? He just got to keep working through it, and the Reds let him do that. And there's a reason it's paying off for him now. Again, little different because they fell out of the playoff race, and that made it easier for him to just work through his mistakes at the end of last year. But you need to let him do that. And it doesn't mean that you can never pinch hit for him or never take him out of a game, but it doesn't need to be every single time there's an opportunity to do it, you do it. Let the guy hit in some big spots. Let the guy stay in the field in some big spots. It might cost you a game. It might. It may have tonight. You could make the argument it did. You need to let him work through these things and figure stuff out on his own at times. And I don't I don't disagree that I think Pat kind of feels like he needs to make an imprint on the game, but I also don't know that many managers don't have that type of problem. And I thought for the most part, Council did a pretty decent job of not doing that. But I do think the biggest thing that's bothering me is that it seems like Murph has kind of gone back to just going platoon for a lot of stuff, which is what I hated with Council. Like that was probably my biggest complaint with Council was we don't need to just be righty lefty platoon for everything. Like just let guys who are decent hitters face the guys that they should be facing. So yeah, that's where I'm at with Chourio. But speaking of coaches, well, sort of, Christian Yelich has been. Ken Rosenthal reported in an Athletic article the other day that Yelich has kind of been acting as a player coach in a way, but really as more of a role model for all the younger players. He specifically worked on Jake Bauers' toe tap with him, which has been paying off really well. I know he worked with Terang on his toe tap in the offseason. And then he also has been working through the leadoff role with Terang quite a bit. And sounds like everybody's been really appreciating all the input he's giving. And then he also, after Yelich put down the bunt that he rolled up against third base against the Cardinals, he kind of ran the team bunt session afterwards to work on bunting with all the guys, which I will say this, I've always thought I'm not a huge bunt guy, but I do think teams need to practice bunting because there are times where you need to bunt or you should bunt, I should say. And you need to be able to get it done when you have that opportunity. And I do think bunting against the shift is something that might be worth it more often than people give it credit for because like a guy like Sal Frelick getting shifted, I really feel like he should just be bunting for hits all the time. He's not getting many extra base hits anyway. Like, why wouldn't you just take the single that you're probably going to hit either way if you get a hit? So I've been hoping to see more of that from him and some of those guys. So I just think it's cool that he's taking an initiative to do that type of stuff. But more than anything, I think it's cool that he's assuming that role because we know Yelich. He's not exactly the most outgoing guy. I'm sure he's not super comfortable with it, but I think he knows that it's something that he has to do as the vet, as the guy who's the highest paid player on the team, as the guy that everyone kind of looks up to. And he's got an MVP to his name. He's got all these rookies and second year outfielders out there with him. Like all those guys look up to him. And it's cool that he really is taking that seriously and he doesn't have to. And there's plenty of vets who don't take that stuff seriously. So to me, I think it's really important for all the young guys, for a young team to have a guy like that where they can up to him and come to him for advice. And it doesn't have to be a coach that you're going to ask questions. It can be a guy that plays on the same team as you. Like we know that from being underclassmen in college, like having upperclassmen that you can talk to about stuff rather than going to a coach is super helpful. So I thought that was just really cool. I don't know, Gunnar, did you have any thoughts on Yelich and him kind of assuming that role?
No, we got similar thoughts. One, I think bunting for a hit with a team with speed too and blatant. I would never have a problem with that. And yeah, you highlighted Sal. That seems like the most obvious thing ever to get him going again. But yeah, I mean, you think of like Brett Favre when he said they don't pay me to, mentor the next guy below me or whatever. But that is the same case here. Yelich doesn't have to do that. But I think kind of in a cool way too with Yelich is we've seen him at his peak, we've seen him at his lowest, quote unquote. And he's been all over the place with us. He's had a big injury that set him back, and it seems like he has so much wisdom in a Brewers uniform.
Yeah,
It's hard to even believe he's like 32, 33. I know we're getting older too. I'm his age when we got him, I'm pretty sure,
I
or
know.
around there. So,
I know.
um, it's like he's the old guy, but he's not really the old guy. But and I joked with you, I think in the off season, I said we got to this is before Reese. I said we have to sign somebody close to his age just so he can have a
You
friend to
did.
talk to in the bench. And I'm glad he got someone close to his age, but it seems like he doesn't even care about that because, as you mentioned, he takes everyone under his wing. We see that like in the spring training videos and whatnot. He's always talking to people and embracing that role. And it seems like he actually has fun with it. And yeah, I mean, I love him. This only adds to it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, especially with a guy like Pat, I know he's been around and everything, but that was kind of why we tied it to the Pat discussion is because having another guy to go to in these situations as a veteran, I think only helps the team. And he had a quote too, I think, just to wrap it up. I don't have it exactly pulled up or something, whatever it was exactly, but um, he had a very blatant quote of like, if you want to be a losing team, you do losing team stuff and you don't actually buy in. But if you want to be a winning team, there's a right way to do things and you got to do it. And I think what he was alluding to is like, I got to assume my role as the leader, even if maybe I don't love it, or he didn't say this part, I'm reading into it. But as you mentioned, it's not necessarily his personality, but he knows I got to do this to make our team win. Because we got to start doing the right stuff to actually play winning baseball. And he's seen it for now, how many years with the Brewers, what it actually looks like. So,
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense, I guess, now that we've gotten the story and all the success that we've had.
Yeah. I did pull up the quote here quick, so I'll just read it. He said, "We hold ourselves to a certain standard. There's an accountability here. If you want to be in a bad team, do what bad teams do. Talk like bad teams do. Play like bad teams do. You can do that. That's fine. But if you want to be on a good team and play winning baseball, you have to do it a certain way." And I think, like you said, that's him kind of outwardly saying in a way that like winning teams have vets who do this. Winning teams have older guys who help the younger guys, and bad teams have guys who just separate themselves because, well, it's not my job to do that. And bad teams have guys who don't care about the younger players because they're trying to take their jobs. They're trying to do this. Like winning teams don't care because they're just trying to do everything to help the team win. And that might mean playing less because someone takes their job. That might mean helping somebody who is eventually going to take your job. But that's what a winning team does. So that was a really good quote for sure. Definitely does not hurt my love of Yelich, which it will always be there no matter what. Well, unless he OJ Simpson's it or something, but had to go there. Yep. I couldn't leave it because what if he did do something like that? I can't say I'd always love him. I wouldn't love him then.
True. Yeah.
Moving on, we talked about Rhys Hoskins a little bit. I guess, how do you see us handling the right-handed at-bats as a result of his injury? I think we've already kind of seen how it's going to go. We might see Gary play a little bit of first base. We're going to see Owen Miller at first base a decent amount against lefties, I'd imagine. I would think that's pretty much how we're going to fill it for now because Bowers will face all the righties. I wouldn't even hate if Bowers just got some starts against lefties. I think he'd be fine in that role, but I would imagine we're pretty much just going to see Miller and Sanchez take those at bats. You have any other names you think might
Yeah,
factor
I
in?
just I just wanted to see Gary more, which it seems like we're going to. Like you said, we've gotten a little bit of a sneak peek. I don't want to see Owen Miller, but I know that we will. And we
Yep.
got Joey Weimer back, but he's not going to be playing DH most
No.
likely, even if he's in a hot streak. I mean, maybe if he is, I don't think he's going to catch one anyways. But he wouldn't play DH because you need his defense for end of games.
Yeah.
So I wanted to throw one name out there since you alluded to him last episode. What are the odds? Because it seems like we need some more right-handed power with Reese out. Now that's scary in my eyes. That's why I think he should be playing.
hmm
But Brock Wilken, do you think there's even a slight chance that maybe let's say Reese gets extended a little bit and he's out a little bit longer than we think? Is there a chance that we could see Brock or no, we're still a little bit of ways?
I would guess if that happens, Wes Clark is more likely to be the guy that they
Okay.
go to in that situation. Wilkins not been great since he came back from his face injury, which isn't shocking. He's wearing a full like cage
hmm
mask on his helmet, so there's a lot going on. I'm sure it's not easy to get back in the box after all of that. He's hit a couple homers, but not exactly a blazing hot start where I think he would be in line for potentially being called up quickly. But Wes Clark did get moved to AAA. He's got huge power. I comped him to Reese at his best. Like I think his ceiling is a Reese Hoskins type player. So if anybody were to end up getting that call, I would guess it would be Wes Clark. But speaking of people coming off of an injury a little bit, DL Hall started his rehab journey first with some live ABs on the field early last week, and then he made a one-inning start for the Timber Rattlers on Sunday. He only threw 11 pitches. He went real quickly through the top of the order, and then that was it. He did have a strikeout. Fastball was sitting 94 and 95 every single time. Every single one that he threw was at least 94. I think that's the main thing that we've got to see in these rehab assignments is to see him throwing with the velocity that we've seen in the past. He's got to be mid 90s. It just has to be. It would be important to just see. I would love to know he's going to be at Nashville next, I should note. So we are going to get StatCast data after this first outing. We'll be getting StatCast data, but it sounds like they're going to be multiple one-inning stints for a little bit here. I don't know that they're planning on him coming back as a reliever. I hope they are not. I would imagine the Joe Ross injury tonight is not helping things in that regard, but the Brewers need starters, and I would be a little upset if they just willingly placed him in the bullpen just to try and figure out what's going on. I think you got to give him some time to rehab it and then bring him back as a starter. But the velo is really all I need to see. If the velo's there, I think he's fine. I think the secondaries have been fine all year. It's really a matter of if he's throwing mid 90s with the same characteristics he used to have on the fastball. So we'll find out more about that. He did say that apparently the knee has been a problem since 2021. But it hadn't really popped up until recently. And then that Cardinals game when he went and slipped, it was a problem. But he said he's feeling more stable on that back leg. And that is, we talked about it at the time, but that's very important for a pitcher to have that back leg, especially stabilized, but also just being able to sink into that hip and get down the mound. And he does really sink into it in his mechanics. If you've ever watched him, I mean, he gets really, really low. He's a big drop and go type of guy. Um, so having that ability, he said he felt really comfortable in Appleton. So hopefully that carries over to Nashville. And I still think he's got the second highest ceiling of all the starters the Brewers have in currently like on the 40 man, close to the majors or in the majors. Mizorowski's obviously got the best stuff of anybody, but he is not yet on the 40, and I don't think we'll see him starting at least this year. So that's what I'm looking for out of Hall. We just mentioned and talked about earlier Joe Ross, most likely going on the IL. So I guess when does it become time for the Brewers to go out and acquire somebody? I mean, personally, I think it's now. I think they have to go get somebody, and there's not much on the free agent market. Brad Keller was just DFA'd by the White Sox, who are terrible and have no idea what they're doing. Brad Keller has decent stuff. He was a guy that Jack and I had talked about in the offseason as somebody that might be interesting before we signed Junis. I would not hate going out and claiming Brad Keller and bringing him in and trying to figure him out. I think he could actually be a starter. But outside of that, Gunnar, is there anybody specifically, not specific players, but is there a type of guy you'd be looking for? Is it you think it's probably got to be a trade? I'm guessing because I'm kind of in that boat at this point. You're basically talking Zach Greinke and Rich Hill if you're talking free agents, and I'm not. I love Zach Greinke to death, but I do not want current Zach Greinke pitching for this Brewers team. So is there like, would you be going out and trying to find like a multi-year pitcher in this type of thing where it's a guy you can use in the future, or are you looking for a rental? Not much you have to give up, but somebody who could at least kind of stabilize things.
I think right now probably just a stabilizer. You could tie this back to the Freddie point a little bit, but I think you look at something that we mentioned a lot is 2018. We never really had that bona fide ace, and like I said, tied to Freddie, he's not really been the ace that you wanted, but you just have five solid pitchers that are pitching really well for you. And you look at our internal options, Hall's coming back, which we thought we're getting that even without Joe Ross, but now Joe Ross is not here anymore, probably. Blaylock, I know you said that maybe he could start. We'll have to see. I
Might
don't know if
have
that
to
was
now.
yeah, exactly. I don't know if that was even his plan originally when he was coming up. So, are they willing to change that plan and actually have him start? I mean, no time was wasted, certainly, so that could be the case. Tobias Myers, we've obviously seen
Yep.
him. Seems like he's next. And then I was going to ask you about Aaron Ashby is the name that we haven't seen in a while or heard of.
No.
Um, yeah,
Nope.
it's weird because you don't even hear his name in that. Because I'm looking at the 40-man roster and I'm like, okay, these are our options. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
we still have Aaron Ashby and he's still hanging around.
Yeah.
I assume
Well,
it's not going well.
oh no.
Okay.
It is not going well at all. Last I saw the ERA was well over 8 in
Yeah,
AAA.
that'll do it.
He had one really good start where he struck out 8 or 9 and only walked one, and the rest of them he has walked like 5 plus almost every game. I mean, this is a it, this was this injury is the worst, one of the worst injuries a pitcher can have. I mean, it's just not good at all for a pitcher, and there's a decent chance he's never playable again, and it sucks because I mean, he's still striking out 35 batters and 31 in the third innings down there. He has also walked 32 batters and 31 in the third. You're walking a batter in an inning. That is bad. He's given up 41 hits as well, so his whip is well over 2. It's been really rough. I will not rule out him pitching again at some point in the future if the velo can come back. And it's taken guys multiple years for this injury. And you got to remember, he is signed. The Brewers gave him an extension, which honestly might make it more likely that he would pass through waivers because I don't think anyone would want to claim him to try and take that contract on. So I would not be shocked if he gets DFA'd soon, where the Brewers are like, hey, if someone claims him, we're off. We don't have to worry about the contract anymore. And if they don't, he's off the 40 man and we don't have to worry about that part of things while he's just not right now even an option, because right now the Brewers are already operating with a 39 man, 40 man roster because Jefferson Cairo is on it, but out for the season, and he can't go on the 60-day unless they want to pay him major league money and start his clock. So they don't want to do that. And it's basically 38 with Ashby because there's no way he's coming up and pitching again in the majors this year. So I would not be shocked if he gets DFA'd soon. But we'll finish this off with some Joey Ortiz talk. So, Gunnar, I have been talking a lot, I feel like, in this one, and I probably haven't let you speak enough, but I'm going to let you take the reins on this one. Along the lines of Joey Ortiz, obviously when we came into the season, you had grown on him after the trade. I think there was a little hesitancy at first when you looked at some of the data and stuff, but the swing, you saw some Ryan Braun in it, and that obviously got you excited. And I was always pretty big on Ortiz, and I pretty big believer even before we got him. He was one of the guys I would have targeted in that trade after Mayo. Um, but I guess so far, I mean, what is causing so much success for him? I mean, is it real? Is he actually this good of a hitter? Is he a legitimate rookie of the year candidate this year?
That for sure, especially right now with stats wise. And we'll get into this Fangraphs article that we got. Actually, we're going to talk about Joey Ortiz regardless, but then we had a nice article drop, really with the same exact topic in mind of is this real and sustainable for him, with all the success that he's having, but without the article in mind, and before we were going to talk about him anyways, so I wanted to say what I was going to say. I think why I like Joey so much, and I should have tied this in with William Contreras last episode. I was trying to think of the best way to describe why he's hitting so well, but um, I think why I like both of those guys is because they have a really good ability to stay on plane with the pitch. And they use like their shoulders pretty well, I feel like. And there's not a lot of movement, there's not a lot of wasted anything going on. It's just a straight on plane with the pitch at all times. And I think that this leaves a lot less room for error. Um, and with his eye now that we've gotten at this point too, with all the walks that we've seen him having, which is what this article is going to break down a little bit more of. I think both of those things are just putting him in a pretty good spot right now. And with this article that we got, and I'm sure you read it and you're better at the fancier words than I am, so I'll definitely want your opinion on the article. But basically, what this raised was he's succeeding, but he's succeeding pretty strangely in comparison to other people in the league. Historically, it's not adding up totally to what it makes sense as. And granted, his sample size is pretty small right now. But they raised a couple questions with him. I think first they talked about this idea of the strike zone. I think I wanted to bring up first, which they talked about. I think they call it a shadow zone, is what they refer to it as, which is basically what I just thought of as like the borderline pitches. And he seems to have done a pretty good job of laying off of those pitches, but he's having a lot more mishits on ones that maybe he should be hitting. And I think when you look back to the guy that we got and we acquired, and maybe why I had questions raised for him is because he wasn't walking as much and he wasn't doing those things. And I think maybe an answer for that is he realized that and he's being a lot more pickier, which I'm trying to get into my hitter brain a little bit where maybe he's being more comfortable being deeper in counts now. He's letting pitches go by that maybe he should hit because he's comfortable hitting with two strikes. He's not going to strike out a lot. He makes good contact as I started out with. So I'm trying to maybe find some answers to it. And I think, is it a little bit of luck right now? Probably, if we're being honest. He's starting to hit the ball higher up in the air now recently. So I think totality of the season, maybe these numbers aren't as great as they seem, but I think I'm more encouraged with what I've seen recently. And I think we talked about it last episode too. The walks seem real, so I think they might have raised the question of like, is this more of luck because he seems to be getting quote unquote lucky with these layoffs that he's either has this insanely good eye because maybe like a Tyler Black where they know the zone so well, but also I think it's just a combination, like I said, me trying to answer it of he's just so comfortable in the box right now. And he's doing something that maybe he's not used to doing, but the mishits are maybe the ones that I'm trying to make more sense of. Meaning basically mishits, I should probably explain that, is basically like your average exit velocity is lower because you're hitting, you got these high exit velocity hits, but you're mixing in so many of these quote unquote mishits, you're not getting the barrel on it all the time. And he's doing too many of those, which makes his average go down more. But we're seeing the higher peak. So, I don't, maybe it's just a little bit of a tweak there where, okay, you're laying off good pitches, but also know what you succeed at. And know what pitches you drive the ball well at. Don't take the good pitches all the time. I'm glad that you're in deeper counts, but actually take advantage of the ones that maybe we know you can actually crush and get when you're getting yourself into those good counts, actually take advantage of it. So, Spencer, I know this is probably an article that you like to nerd out about. And a lot of it probably made more sense to you, but what did you take away from the article?
I thought it was interesting. I don't know that there's a ton to take away, honestly. Ben Clemens does very, very good work. Any of his articles are good. Um, and he writes about the Brewers a decent amount, it seems like. So I don't know if he's got a connection to the Brewers or not, but it feels like whenever I read anything on Fangraphs about the Brewers, it is a Ben Clemens article. So even if he's not a Brewer fan, shout out to him for actually covering the Brewers because we don't get much national coverage in general these days. But the thing is with this article, I did think it was very interesting that he pointed out and you talked about, but like the fact that he chases at an average or a slightly above better rate compared to the rest of the league on pitches that are clearly out of the zone. But on these pitches that are just barely out of the zone, he's way better than average. And what Clemens pointed out and what he went through is that it feels a little lucky that he's done that well on shadow pitches. And I think that's accurate. I think that is something I've kind of noticed too, is that one, I feel like he's gotten a pretty good zone compared to some of the other Brewer hitters, where I would say he takes a close pitch and he doesn't often get it called a strike. Um, I don't know what that is. I don't know that that's something he's actually doing, or I think it's just a little bit luck of the draw in that regard. But I do think he's just adopted a more patient approach than what he had in Baltimore, especially in AAA. And I don't, I agree with you that I think at one point he's going to have to find the balance between those two. But I like the fact that he's taken this more patient approach and said, you know what, I might take a pitch that's hittable once in a while, but I'm not going out of the zone constantly to go after stuff that I can't hit. Um, I might end up getting frozen once in a while, but that's okay because I'm just not going to be. I think Jackson Chourio could learn a bit from this type of approach, is kind of what I'm saying, in that I think it'd
Sure.
be okay to take some pitches once in a while where you don't have to go and attack everything just because you see the pitch and you're like, oh, I could hit it. Like, no, just be patient, have a good approach. Like Chourio, Ortiz makes hard contact when he hits the ball. When he takes his A swings, like he can hit the ball hard. He's got 111 plus mile per hour exit velo for his max this year, which is well above average. And like you said, the average exit velo is not great, but overall it's fine. It's nothing. I think it's about 50th percentile. It's pretty much average. It might be a little bit above even. Um, but either way, what I see with Ortiz is a guy who's just trying to find that happy medium, like you talked about. And I think you're going to see eventually hitter or pitchers might be a little bit more aggressive in the zone against him to try and get him to be. We talked about it with Oliver Dunn earlier in the season in a way, like it's the opposite of Dunn in some ways because Dunn swung and missed on stuff in the zone constantly, but he rarely chased. But I think Ortiz probably will take stuff in the zone quite a bit. So pitchers know that they could go after him and try and attack him. But the thing is, lately, when pitchers have gone after him, he's driven the ball. And I think it's real. I think he's a good hitter. I don't think it's going to be a 150 weighted runs created plus or whatever it's at right now. If he's that type of player with what I think he can do defensively long term, that's going to be like a 5 WAR player. And if he's that type of player, I'll be absolutely thrilled. And I wouldn't rule it out. I don't think that's impossible for him. He swings the bat. He has very good bat speed, which has been fun to see all those stats coming out as the season goes along. Um, but he's making contact in this article. They pointed out he's making contact on 92% of the end zone pitches he swings at. So, like I talked about, Oliver Dunn has an issue where he can't make contact with pitches in the zone. That is not a problem for Joey Ortiz. So that's an elite, top of the line, probably in the top 5 percentile in baseball. And that was something that was holding true at AAA last year as well. Like he did not miss pitches in the zone. Like you touched on though, in terms of less miss hits, it feels like he does. It almost feels like it's a positive in some ways for me. There's a lot of good hitters who have that, where they sell out and take A swings and they end up hitting it off the end of the bat because they just were out in front a little bit. Like I would rather you do that than a miss hit be somebody like Frelick who check swings and hits the ball softly because he's just so worried about getting the bat on the ball. Um, I think for the most part, his miss hits have been good swings that he's just not barreling. And I would rather you take good swings. I think a lot of them have fallen for hits and stuff because of that. I think that a miss hit when you take a good swing can still fall for a hit in the outfield, but a miss hit when you are just trying to get the bat on the ball, like we saw with Terang last year, we're seeing with Frelick this year, those type of swings don't do anything. They're just rollovers or grounders, or little pop-ups and stuff like that. So this was a great article. I would definitely recommend reading through it yourselves. Um, it's kind of nerdy. It's a Fangraphs article. It's always going to be nerdy, but it's not that hard to understand. For the most part, I think the most confusing part is kind of that shadow zone type stuff. And really, all that is if you ever went to Baseball Savant, you can actually look at there's a graph or a strike zone, I should say, that shows like heart. Here's where the shadow of the zone is. Here's where it's a chase, and here's where a waste pitch is their other classification, and that's where it's like nobody should be swinging at these. Um, but the league does swing at them at a 5% clip. It says in this article, so it is a waste pitch, but it's very unlikely someone would swing at it. I would bet that the pitch that Adames swung at in the ninth inning of that or in the extra inning of that Marlins game may have qualified as a waste pitch because that pitch was nowhere near the zone. Um, but yeah, it's all really good. It even points out a little bit of a Rhys Hoskins thing here. So Rhys has very similar chase rates and zone swing rates to what Joey Ortiz does. He swings at only 17% of chase pitches and 1% of waste pitches, whereas Ortiz swings at 25% of chase and 6% of waste. So that's kind of where the article was taking it in terms of saying, like, I don't know how sustainable that shadow zone like how successful he's been in the shadow zone is. Um, but he's doing a lot of damage on stuff over the plate, and he's doing a lot of damage when he gets pitches to hit. So the article in the end basically talks about how they think Ortiz is an everyday player, a good everyday player, somebody that they think is a foundational piece to the Brewers' future. But it was well researched, and they talk about some of the things that could maybe take this from where he is right now to being more of a above average hitter rather than a really, really good hitter. But yeah, I rambled again, even though I said this was for you, Gunner. So we'll
It's a
finish
nerdy
this.
article, like I said, so it's very much expected.
True. You're not wrong. We'll finish this with our random Brewers. So, Gunner, who you got this week?
I will be shocked if anyone remembers him playing for the Brewers. I actually feel like this was my best pick I've ever had. Um, Another one of these guys where I looked up his stats and I already forgot it, but I think he had like less than 50 at bats with us, I want to say. But I swear I saw like 20 of them when I went to the games. Like I watched so many of this guy hitting. I picked Mike Lamb. Uh, you will probably remember him if you do remember that name from the Houston
Yep.
Astros. I think was on a World Series team, didn't win. I don't believe that. Or did they win that year? 2000. Oh, that was the White Sox.
Yeah, White Sox won.
But I think pretty sure he's on that team.
He was.
Third baseman had power at that point. I remember once we got him, he had zero power, and then he was quickly out of the league. But I remember like even I knew who he was. I was probably less than 10 years old or 10 years old. 2008 too, I think that season. So that
Yep.
was a playoff year for us.
Yep.
And I thought he was just going to help more than he did, and he didn't really do much for us. But I remember being like, even back then, excited that we got Mike Lamb. Um, had a little bit of a unique stance too. I remember always wanting to use it in MLB The Show. Had the leg out, but yeah, didn't do much with us. Another one of those guys. But like I said, I'll be shocked if anyone actually remembers him. But yeah, who'd you have?
Yeah, Mike Lamb. I just looked it up. He had 11 plate appearances for the Brewers. So,
Oh, yeah, there it is. Okay, I swear I saw
I do
eight of
remember.
those.
I do remember him on the Astros, and I remember him coming to the Brewers, but I don't remember any of his at bats or anything like that. Um, I went with Matt Wise. I was recently uh, kind of brought back into my memory with a tweet that somebody said, like, nobody understands the bond a 9-year-old had with that random reliever when they were a kid. And for me, that was Matt Wise for some reason. I loved Matt Wise as a kid. Um, I'm convinced, if those salad tongs never cut him and put him on the IL, that guy would have been an all-star. But 2005, he had a 3.36 ERA. He was a guy who struck out almost a batter an inning that year, and then the next 2 years he was okay, but the strikeouts went away completely, especially in '06. And then '07 he was fine as well, but he wasn't anything too special. But I enjoyed him for some reason. I must have seen him in that time period. We had a 20 pack of games, and we would go to a ton of games and sit in the bleachers. So there must have been something that drew me to him. I don't really remember exactly what it was, but I was a big Matt Wise fan, and he did have one of the funniest injuries ever by putting himself on the IL by cutting himself on a pair of salad tongs. Um, and then he was a bullpen coach, I want to say, for the White Sox, or maybe the pitching coach even, but I think he was the bullpen coach for the White Sox as of a few years ago. I'm not sure if he's still coaching right now, but he was a apparently a pretty good pitching mind, and he had an okay career. I mean, for a reliever, he pitched in 209 games with a 4.23 ERA, so solid. Uh, Definitely nothing to make fun of a guy making it to the majors with that type of career. So he did fine. I don't really know what drew me to him, but I was a big Matt Wise fan as a kid. So that's my pick. And yeah, I think that's all we got for this one. So please like and subscribe on whatever platform you are on. Remember to follow us on Twitter at the Cream City Pod. And please feel free to leave feedback for us on how we can get better. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time.
True.